edeceğiz. Ondan önce yüksek müsaadenizle birkaç duyurum var. Yarın siyaset okulumuz yok. Merhaba Akif. Ama Bahçeşehir Üniversitesi lisansüstü programlarının yarın saat 5'te bir semineri olacak yine her gün olduğu gibi. Karantinada önce yaşlılar ve çocuklar konseptiyle bir 23 Nisan'a özel değerli Kerem Alptekin hocamızın moderatörlüğünde uzman doktor Bülent Madi, nöroloji uzmanı, uzman psikolog Refika Yazgaç, Bahçeşehir Üniversitesi Sağlık Bilimleri yarı zamanlı öğretim görevlisi ve Profesör Doktor Özlem Karaırmak hocamızla birlikte 23 Nisan'a özel güzel bir webinar yapıyoruz. Dolayısıyla hepinizi yarın oraya bekliyoruz. Online staj başvurularımızı zaten biliyorsunuz. HLO'nun hesabında gerekli bilgiler var. Oraya başvurabilirsiniz. Bugün 23. günümüz, 3. dersimiz. Çok fazla zaman kaybetmeden çok kıymetli Howard Beasey hatırlatıyorum. Hello.
Hocam, nasılsınız? I'm great.
Bomba.
I'm great. How are you?
Not bad, not bad. Doing our best. You are in Washington, London, New York, or Istanbul?
Ankara. None of the above.
I couldn't. Okay, in Ankara. At least you are in Turkey. You are
I am in
safer than
Turkey.
being in New York at the moment, right?
That's right. That's right. I'm in New York, not in the U.S., not in New York. And normally I spend most of my time in Istanbul, but at the moment I'm over in Ankara.
Welcome again. Now, distinguished friends, let me introduce this gentleman to you from our perspective. He's a great friend of mine, personally, great friend of our university. He has a lot of expertise about defense issues. He is one of the best that you can get a lot of feedback, especially in Turkish-American defense relations. He is also a great expert on Turkish-American political and trade relations. Also now, he is the CEO of IKAR Industries, and he is a real good investment expert with an outstanding advisory and executive team that they founded in IKAR Industries. So they are doing a great job and tremendous team. I strongly suggest you to follow up the IKAR Industries. They are doing a great job. So I'm once again so happy to host Howard Beasey with us today. So, dear Howard, we are going to hit from different parts. There's going to be a lot of questions with you, but without losing too much of your time, let's start with Turkey and US. Then we will slowly move to economy and the other issues. Okay. Now, the last time we left Turkish-American relations was we were getting into a better shape compared with last year, 2019. What happened was about the Idlib case. Turkey and Russia made the relationship. That time, United States starts saying, you know what, we are behind Turkey. We are following up Turkey's intentions. So things were warming up at least a little. But then the pandemic started and we forget everything.
Yeah.
So now, can you tell us, at least from the perspective politically, then I'm going to come to the economic part. But how would you see Turkish-American relations, especially in the era that we don't see?
Yeah, it's a great question, Hoca. And again, thanks for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be here and be with the folks online here. And thanks for the kind introduction. Of course, we're doing our best on all those different fronts. As you know, I relocated myself more or less in my time I spend in Turkey nowadays since the end of 2018. Prior to that, I had run the American Turkish Council, as you know, and essentially I had gotten tired of advocating and decided to get into the business space and come over. And your question is a really interesting one, because I would say at the moment we're simply on hold, as you rightfully point out. This COVID global pandemic is rightly taking everybody's attention at the moment, and the issues that underlie the relationship are still the issues that underlie the relationship. You mentioned Idlib. You mentioned how that had added to a little bit of a warming in the relationship, compared to a very low point, I would argue, at the second and third and end of 2019. I mean, we bottomed out, I would say. Well, we've said that several times in the last few years, but we bottomed out, I would say, in October, really, when we were at one of our tensest points since probably 1974, when we had the arms embargo. So we've just kind of forgotten or just put them that the U.S. Congress had less vitriol towards Turkey over all these different issues. And it was mostly about Russia, because if there's one country that will get the U.S. very, very excited in a negative way, it's Russia. Anything tied to Russia. And this is just a fact. And it's maybe a little bit overblown, I would say. Sometimes we get very excited if you tie Russia to anything. And this is where we stand today. So I would say that we can expect, once we get beyond the COVID-19 peak in the pandemics and life starts to come back to normal somewhat, whatever that normal looks like in the future, and the U.S. Congress can start thinking about, something else, because this is, it's a narrow bandwidth there. They can only think about so many things at one time. Then some of these issues are going to come back to the surface, I think.
Okay, now let's come to the economic part.
Okay.
We always advocate to promote Turkish-American relations in economic level.
Yeah.
But to be frank, when you take the military purchasing, the military materials, I'm talking about anything related to military, when you take it out, it's really below the expectations. And that we have been working for years. Do you really believe, now you are a little bit out of the scoop now, because you used to be advocating this. Now you are more free to talk about that.
Right.
Now, I always say this, okay? I'm an academician. I can say whenever I want, whatever I want. I'm a free guy. But now you are too, by the way. So let's be so current initiatives that we used to do, or the governments are pushing in that extent, Turkish-American trade relation cannot go far, okay? Unless some government, either or, better one is both, is taking a serious, but a real serious approach, which is going to open certain opportunities for the company, right? Plus, remove some certain quotas in front of each other, so on and so forth. So, do you really believe, with the current condition, with the current perspective for both governments, both industries, both regulations, both everything, do you really see Turkish-American economic relations, trade relations will evolve in the upcoming years?
Since we're being very frank, I think no. Next question.
No, I'm in the same page.
I mean, it's we tried very, very hard. You tried, even longer period than I did at that those efforts for years and years and years to somehow carve out a niche and a growth trajectory for U.S.-Turkey trade relations. And we did. There was, in one blip in time when we were able to achieve some growth there, and this was back 2009, 2012 period, where we did do some substantial growth there, and it was principally for a lot. We got rid of unnecessary trade barriers. We, did things to encourage better and closer business ties between Turkey and the U.S. I think you can make a tremendous argument that there should be closer economic ties between Turkey and the U.S. We just keep falling over ourselves in the political sense. If you recall, right here at the end of last year, we being the U.S., started dangling this $100 billion trade initiative, and it got good traction. And on the Turkish side, they also jumped on board and started to advocate this. We had several visits back and forth. We had the Secretary of Economy come over here a couple of times. But this was a very thinly veiled attempt to do a carrot and stick model to get some leverage on the political front. Meaning we wanted, issues like the S-400 to go away. And so we painted this very rosy picture, which I would argue is possible. The things that were put on the table are all possible if we could just get out of the way of it and, remove the preconditions for it, I guess. So this is in fact true that we could do a lot of those things that could get us to get there. And easily, between the size of economy, certainly of Turkey today, and of course the U.S. economy is massive, you could easily do this kind of business between the two countries.
Okay. Now, about Turkey-US, my last question. Then I have one question to you as an American.
Okay.
Okay, as an American, about the elections. Then I will stop everything and move to your official current business about the possible investment opportunities. But give me two more questions.
Absolutely.
Now, the first one is coming. Hopefully, inshallah, let's say, as everybody is expecting in the world, starting from June, we go back to track. Okay, the businesses will reopen. Everybody will start, transforming to their old stuff. The economy will be on the foot again, and we will keep on moving and moving and moving. This is the hopeful or inshallah scenario. I strongly hope it will happen ASAP. Okay, because I am bored. So I want to go to my office. Anyhow, so if these things continues, most likely for at least couple months, which I'm going to ask it to you in the future too, we will have some economic struggles all over the world, because suspending the world for 2 months brings at least 10 times of chaos than the 2 months. Anyhow, but sooner or later, this thing will be on track. Okay, and then we will start talking about politics as we used to be, international relations. So let's see where we left off. S-400s, Patriots, Turkey-US tense relations. United States just approved the so-called Armenian genocide bill from the US Congress, so and so forth, right?
Yep.
When we wake up from the corona issue, both US and Turkey, do you think this process that we would have a hopeful relationship, or we will carry from where we left off?
I mean, if I'm speaking from a wishful side, of course, I've always hoped for the second case, where we would have closer relationships and maybe we would put, bygones be bygones, kind of way of thinking. But I think, now I don't think this is going to happen very quickly, because I think that the recovery process for the global, and you outlined some of this very eloquently, the global economies, countries in general, the stops and starts of restarting our economies, restarting our civil societies, et cetera, is going to take a long, long time. I think the forecast models keep inching this COVID issue for some time to come. And so I don't think that the Turkey-U.S. relationship is suddenly going to pop back to the top of the agenda like it was towards the end, third quarter of last year, like I mentioned, around October timeframe. The Idlib piece is an ever-evolving one. This has, as you rightfully pointed out, given a lot of, or a lot more, let's say, goodwill from the U.S. Congress. And let me explain something. You know this very well. You've studied the U.S. government and whatnot. But for the folks that are out there listening, there's the U.S. Congress and then there's the U.S. executive, the president. The president has never wanted to slap Turkey with any sort of tariff regime. He's been, in some cases, quite understanding of the circumstances that Turkey has found itself in with the S-400. Some of our fault on the U.S. side in terms of the way this was negotiated, et cetera. So the president is not the issue here. The executive branch is not the issue. It's the Congress. Now we're running head on into the election, which I know is your next question. And this is coming in November in the U.S. And this, as everybody knows, this is make or break time for what it looks like is going to be a President Trump and Vice President Biden election runoff. And so the Republican Party in Congress now, going back to the Congress, not the executive, they're going to be very, very careful to do anything else to disadvantage the president. Because at the end of the day, whether they like President Trump or not, which is, of course, a big open question, because they've been they've fought quite a bit over the last couple of years, they still want the Republican in the White House. And he's the horse that they've got to bet on. There is no changing that. And so they're going to do very little to weaken the White House anymore or any further on any issue. So, whether it be a sanctions bill coming back up or some of the things that were being discussed at the end of last year, I just don't see those coming. I really don't. And, hopefully we can also continue to work on some of the good initiatives that we've been talking about, some of the good things that we're doing, and stay on that better track. But that's going to need to be fleshed out here in the next couple of months. But I think you're going to see 2020 go by without much more real open challenge or difficulty in the U.S.-Turkey relationship.
Okay, so I'm still going to touch bases with the election question.
Sure.
Julie.
Sure.
Now, what is my fun times for the U.S. elections? The time I love most?
Yeah. What's this?
Convention time.
Convention, sure,
right?
Sure.
Because when I look at the conventions, even though candidates are already set, from the convention smell, as we say in Turkish, you can understand how much each party is going to stay behind the president or how much enthusiasm the leadership of the parties has behind the candidates. So I love the conventions. Conventions show me a lot, right? Now, as someone who studied American government and history for his entire life, I don't think there's going to be good conventions because people are going to be... First, I'm not sure if there's going to be conventions.
In the normal sense, maybe not.
I don't know. I can predict it. Two, the campaigning is definitely going to be the worst ever in U.S. history because people are not going to like to go out for campaigning or to, seek for vote. Three, even the election part, I'm not sure how many people are going to go out and vote. From Democrat Party, I'm not sure the Bernie guys are going to back up Biden or not, even though Elizabeth Warren already said, I'm going to back him up. But the Bernie people are staying over there.
Yeah.
Trump supporters, I don't know still, even though the party is going to be unique like this, but how much and how many of them are going to go to vote? So, long word short, I have no clue about all this things because of the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
I'm asking this question to you as an American, not as Howard Beasey, the person who knows politics or etc. Because I know no analyst can analyze this situation. It's so uncommon. But that's how we react for the election, till to the election, up to the elections, from the political point of view. I'm not asking who's going to win. I'm asking how the behavior of the people are going to shape up in the upcoming days.
Yeah. Well, let's be honest. As an American, I can tell you that we're not good Democrats. Not Democrats in the sense of the political party, but just democratic mechanisms. We're not good Democrats, and what I mean by this is we don't go out to vote. even in the best of times, even in the most excited of campaigns, we turn out less than 50% of the total population of the U.S. to go to the polls. And so I think you may be onto something, that we're going to have an unprecedented, low turnout rate, because there isn't a lot of excitement. I can tell you, there's in just the network of people I have, there's just there's a malaise that we're tired, in the sense, because the current administration, the president that's been in power, has been under nonstop siege, maybe rightfully so, maybe not, but nonstop. The news is nonstop about this, and you've got the Fox network, and you've got the CNN network, and everybody's picking sides, and the news is just always negative. And so there's some just general electric exhaustion in just the news in its own right. Then you couple that with what's going on right now, which is, of course, this pandemic and the ensuing things that will come in terms of restarting and the latent fears that will still exist and whatnot. And so I think you are going to see a really horrible turnout. It's going to be very hard for the Democrats to get the base really, really excited about Joe Biden. He is not what they were hoping for. They were hoping for sort of a paradigm shift in this. But of course, as the U.S. system is built, there's the tried and true methods keep, the sort of predictable candidates in the race. And, Bernie looked super strong coming out. And then, just 2 Tuesdays of elections, and suddenly he was out. Poof. And gone. And then Biden was rocketed to the top. So, yeah, it's going to be a really lackluster year, I think. I think there's a lot that feel quite defeated and just succumb to the idea that there's going to be another 4 years with the Republicans in the White House. And again, I don't think the Democrats did what they needed to field a candidate that would excite enough people and pull enough people behind him to. I think likely the worst thing that's going for President Trump right now is this pandemic and the economy that's going to suffer behind it.
Okay. Now let's leave America, politics, all things aside.
Sure.
Can you tell us a little bit about the car industries that you co-founded?
Hello to Mario out there.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, so I'll just step back a little bit further than that. So I came to Turkey at the end of 2018, and I was working for a U.S. entity, consulting for a U.S. company, and actually spent much of 2019 establishing a factory here in Ankara in the defense sector. So a joint venture U.S.-Turkey company, U.S.-Turkey joint venture in the defense sector. We launched the factory in the fourth quarter of last year, and things are going quite well, and we're very, very pleased with that. So this is what I spent a lot of my time in 2019 doing. At the same time, as I said, I really had a strong desire to stop advocating business and do business. And for me, Turkey has always been an exciting business space. And so I came over, and Mario and I have known each other for quite some time. He's well known, of course, to Bahçe Şehir as a professor and part of the board and things like this. And he and I started to talk about what we could do together in terms of a business venture. We looked at the landscape here. Of course, everybody knows, no secret, last year was a tough year in the economy here. And because of the network that he and I both have been able to build up over the years in the business community and whatnot, we really wanted to find a way that we might be able to even help, so to speak, good companies that were having difficulties, in their operating capital and these sorts of norms. So this was initially where we started the idea, and then we really expanded that out and really liked the idea of icon industry. So we specifically chose that second term, industries, because we really see ourselves as a investment company that invests in real tangible industry. So we're talking about more or less 6 sectors that we focus on: energy, mobility, defense and aerospace, safety, security, all fall into this category. Technology, automation, mid-cap, small-cap companies, so general manufacturing, automotive parts, these sorts of companies. Real estate, of course, is in our portfolio, and then leisure, hospitality, these kinds of things. And our focus is, we're based in London. Our focus is emerging markets like Turkey. Of course, we really feel strongly about this market. And then Europe and US. At the moment, we're really surprised at how busy we really are because, of course, as everything has been impacted by COVID, the investment world has been sort of shaken with all the uncertainty. We've seen the stock markets crash. But at the same time, there is a strong desire to find other places to put your money, other more tangible, more durable investments. And so things like real estate, things like investing in tangible companies, these are becoming more, straight equity investments. These are becoming much, much more interesting to folks rather than sort of the volatility of the stock market. And so we're busier than ever. And we're excited to do it and excited to have it. And so this is where ICAR sits. We've got a great team. Mario is my co-founder and co-CEO. And then we have two other gentlemen in our executive board. And then we have a very and accomplished group of sectoral experts. This grows day by day for us. And these folks really are our secret weapon, so to speak, in that they help us analyze these projects. They, in some cases, help us run these projects. And so these guys are very, very valuable to us. And we're really excited about what our possibilities can be.
So the possible opportunities. I'm pretty sure you, Mario, and the rest of the team have been in touch with possible investments or partnerships from the clients. Now,
sure.
A tricky question. These clients that you have been talking to, mainly, I'm 100% sure there's a lot from Turkey too, but are they seeking for an investment to invest in Turkey or from Turkey to outside?
So it depends on who we're talking to. If I'm speaking, there is a strong desire globally. There is an outflow from emerging markets at the moment. So capital outflows. There's a lot of uncertainty around the emerging markets. Turkey's not alone in this. So most of our pipeline at the moment is US based, US centric. A little bit in Europe. If you want to talk about sectors, real estate is a big one. Real estate is still very strong. I think this owes to the fact
Which
that
direction?
it's US bound real estate. So
from Turkey to US mainly.
Sure, Turkey or investors in the U.S. looking for real estate deals. As I say, we're sort of or European investors looking for real estate deals. If I had to categorize the market, so the U.S. market is everybody's trying to find the good deal, right? Everybody knows with these kinds of events and these kinds of crises, whether it's the 2008 financial crisis or whatever. One man's loss is another man's gain, right? So everybody's searching for what that is. What is it? Is it real estate? Is it, distressed asset purchases, et cetera, et cetera? And there are going to be tons of this kind of stuff because this COVID pandemic is going to, and this is a totally separate subject, but it's going to wreak havoc on the global economy like none of us have ever seen. This is, I think, an easy prediction. So everybody in the U.S. market is, getting quite aggressive and shifting their money out of the markets. The bonds aren't interesting anymore. And so they're looking for tangible equity investments. European market is quite cautious. The European market, and this is also true in normal times, but the European market is quite cautious. They're trying to sort of assess, what the lay of the land looks like. And what the lay of the land will look like post-corona. And so they're a little more cautious. They're not making any big, bold moves at the moment, but they're just kind of on a wait and see mode. This is a general characterization. It's not true for everybody. Emerging markets like Turkey are really facing the toughest conditions, I would say, because their currencies are under pressure. Their capital is not flowing in; it's flowing out at the moment, and it's going to result in a lot of perhaps good deals down the line where you have companies that are really in quite distress, and they're going to need equity investments. But at the moment, not many people are really looking towards those. A little bit more time to flush out. Emerging market governments are doing all they can to try and shore up the economies in their currency at the time. But it's going to be a really rocky road globally. And emerging markets are going to feel a really tough pinch for, I would say, the next couple of quarters.
Now, Professor Dr. Ender Arıkan, my great friend, one of the top doctors in Turkey, he has a question. Which one of is better than the other? Treating the world by China and Asia, or US and the Western part of the world for human health and future?
So which is better? Say the second part again. Which is better? China, working with the Chinese?
Working with Asia or China, or US and the Western part of the world, but from the perspective of human health and future.
Wow, this is a tough
then
one.
I'm going to go with Cemil Özgür's question later on, or common friend Cemil.
Yeah, no, this is a very tough one because it's if it hadn't been human lives being lost, the social experiment, if you will, of the COVID pandemic has been quite fascinating in the sense to look at how individual governments have responded. And I'll start backwards. You look at the U.S. and the U.S. response to this. The U.S. had the longest of anybody to craft a clear response and a sensible response to this. And I think by any measure, you could argue that didn't necessarily occur. And part of this is due to the structure of the U.S., the federal system that we have, where a lot of power still lies at the state level. Furthest, we had the longest time to prepare. I would argue that maybe the U.S. didn't do a great job of that, and that'll play out in the next few months. Then you come to Europe, and Europe is a grab bag because it's a very compressed space, but it's got obviously all these autonomous countries, and so everybody had to decide, in fairly short order. Of course, Italy was the obvious, got hit hardest initially, and so from a human health standpoint and this sort of thing, the Democrat, and I'll say this because I can say these things, the Democratic governments did worse. I'll say this: the less democratic governments did better because they were able to implement more stringent, holistic policy to track. If you look what the Chinese have done or did. Now, again, you can question number reporting and things like this, but the less democratic governments tended to do better. You could certainly find examples where they didn't. But I think the outcome of this is going to be really interesting in the social side. I think what we're headed towards is a less free world. Let me clarify that. What I mean is less free in terms of our social liberties, because you're going to give up some of this, or you may decide to give up some of this to your governments, to our governments, to prevent things like this pandemic from happening again through apps on your phone, mandatory measurements of your temperature, to thermal imaging cameras on the street. We're going to be less free in terms of an economy sense. We are not going to, and we've already been trending this direction. We've been trending in a much more closed system around certain industries. We've been throwing up these tariffs around the globe. We've been doing, trade wars with China, between the United States and China. So we're going to be less free on the economic front. Free markets are not going to be the rule. There's going to be a lot more controls placed on our market system. And then thirdly, politically, in our political engagements and things, we're also going to be less free. We're going to tend to be more nationalist. We're going to tend to want to control assets. You're going to see travel, nationalize assets and privatize them. And because of some of and maybe in some cases out of necessity, we're going to end up nationalizing critical assets again. And it's going to make governments more insular. And this is a fact that we've already been trending towards. And in the short term, I think this is absolutely going to be the case.
Now, I'm going to go with Cemil Özgür's question, but before that, I want to remind everybody something. I remember when I used to go with my family to United States or travel the world, it was safer. It's not safer. It was easier and more comfortable in the past.
Yeah.
When I was a student first in Florida, we used to go to the airport, one, X-ray and done.
Uh-huh.
So we were going to the States. Imagine after September 11, the weird machines start staying around.
Body scans.
Like this. Plus, it used to, throw something like a bullet to you, like a something like that. Then you carry your bag to special X-ray machines. You remember all that things.
Yep.
Then it started assembled the security systems all over the world, right? It become mandatory. It become the new normal, as we call it. Now, I believe after this corona issue, can you imagine everybody's testing my, temperature?
Yep.
It's not your business, but, you don't say no because the guy says, I don't admit you to the hospital. I don't admit you to the pharmacy, etc., etc. So I think these things, the biggest problem in the human rights is if people started to adopt the restrictions as normal.
Yep.
I think the new restrictions will be implemented by almost every single country in the upcoming days will be people's normal. That's going to be a cut in the right. Anyhow, that's my personal opinion. Now, Cemil is asking something that we talked a little bit, but still I want to ask it once again. Our common friend, great friend, Cemil Özgür. Howard, do you think 100 billion bilateral trade between Turkey and U.S. is doable?
First of all, let me just tag on to what you were just commenting. I agree with you 100% that there's been a lot of smart people that have written about this. In times of crisis, we tend to freely give up certain social liberties and freedoms to allow, and rightfully so, to allow our governments to handle whatever the crisis is. You raised 9/11. The Americans gave up tons of civil liberty and allowed our government to do a lot of things that in peacetime or normal times we certainly wouldn't have accepted. And then these tended to become normal out of a wanting to prevent future acts like this. And so I think we do need to be really careful about what we're doing as it relates to our health systems and our monitoring of health conditions, et cetera. So that's all I would say there. I agree with you 100% that we need to be thoughtful about this. And this is really going to fall to worlds like yours, academicians and things like this, to sort of highlight how this happens. And you become inoculated to it. It goes on long enough. And we've definitely, we talked about it. And again, if I'm saying honestly under conditions today, I would say no. Under current conditions, the tenor and the still ongoing disputes between Turkey and the U.S. In a number of ways and a number of levels politically will never allow us to go to 100 billion in trade. If I'm speaking futuristically and if we can work through the political side, then yes, the things that have been proposed are all realistic and possible. And that's what I would say on that front, is that they're all realistic and possible. If we did free trade agreements and negotiations between Turkey and the U.S. and could conclude them, then yes, absolutely. The sizes of economy, the types of industry, et cetera, would easily support 100 billion in trade.
Howard, let's go back to United States because you said a lot of people would like to find a good opportunity to invest, right? Now, we have been watching the situation in New York, not that hopeful.
Sure.
We have been watching certain other places, not well. I talked with some great friends from New York here. We had this one. People are not happy with the current situation, etc. But my question is this. President Trump would like to bring back the economy and want to send people out again to their businesses, right? I understand the main motive behind him. Okay, understandable. Even though I can't understand, by the way. I say understandable, but the health is everything on that perspective. Number one, do you think the clash between Trump and the governors, Trump and the people who wants to stay home, how tense it's gonna go? Two, when do you think the U.S. economy will reopen fully? Do you think it's gonna be in June or earlier than expected, as President wanted?
Yeah. So, I mean, the motivations for President Trump are purely self-interested in the form of election results. He knows that the longer the economy and the harder the economy is hit, the less likely, or the more it impacts his chances for re-election. So, full stop. This is the only motivation behind it. It has nothing to do with anything else. You've seen news of and again, we go back to the fact that the governors have a lot of autonomy, and we've already seen this get to really sort of silly levels. But silly in the realm of the U.S. the political fray these days is far beyond what it ever used to be. But the governor of Georgia has said that by this Friday he's going to open up institutions like bars and restaurants, et cetera, et cetera. And legally he has the mandate to do this. And I'm sure we'll get gleaming support from President Trump on this. And then you turn to the Michigan side, and the Michigan governor said that she, is really doubled down on the self-isolation and social distancing. And we've seen a lot of attacks against her. One's Republican, one's Democrat. No surprise there. So, yeah, I think this is going to continue to be really, really ridiculous in that sense, and have little to do with the interest of the average American and whether he gets back to work and can start making his livelihood again, or not, or stay healthy for that matter. So, yeah, I think that it's really dependent on how that rolls out and how bad that gets. To answer your second part of that question, which is when is the economy fully open again? And of course, there's some questions around what does that mean. I would say, if it's me, I think we're headed on through June. I think you will start to see waves of things opening up, going on into the month of June. Some normalcy starting to return, but I think we're in for. There is no date on the calendar when somebody's going to come out on a press conference and say, everything's fine, everything's open, go back to your lives as normal. This is not going to happen anywhere in the world. It is going to be a rolling process of trial and error. Sudden, and the public goes back to life as normal, then you likely are going to see infection rates rise. I had a meeting last week with a close friend out on the West Coast who was diagnosed with COVID, recovered from it, but was still being tested to see where if he was still infectious. And 30 days after he had recovered, was feeling fine, he was still infectious with the disease. No symptoms, no nothing, but he could still potentially give that disease to somebody else 30 days after he was recovered. So again, we don't know how long this virus can last. We don't know how it's transmitted necessarily. We're learning more and more every day, and there's thousands of great people really, really smart people that are way smarter than I am that are working on this daily, minute by minute. But it's going to be a rolling process. There's going to be fits and starts. And I think where it's going to get really hard is when a government has to reimpose restriction, because restriction sucks. We all can agree on this. Restriction is horrible. You know, I might stay in my house for 2 days on a normal weekend, you know, pretty regularly, right? You know, don't need to go out, stay around in my pajamas and, you know, Netflix and chill, as they say. And the fact that the government says you can't go out just makes it worse. You know, you're just like, I can't go out. You know, I really needed to. So the reality is when the government is going to have to try and reimpose restriction on people, this is when it's going to get really ugly. We've already seen minor protests in the U.S., Colorado, et cetera, where people are protesting the government can't keep them locked in and locked at home, et cetera. And this is when it's going to get really tough and really, really ugly as we try and work through that process in a sensible way. And what really doesn't give me a lot of hope in the U.S. is what you've already mentioned, which is this vitriol. There's no sort of teamwork or team effort or team sort of spirit between the states and the national level government, it seems to me, that is going to make that easier. And in fact, it may only exacerbate it, I think.
Howard, for our students, you know, inshallah, we will make sure you get together with my students in Bahçeşehir soon, face to face.
Yeah.
As I said, still this is good. We have an opportunity to see you guys, but I prefer face to face no matter what.
Absolutely.
But we have an advantage. First time ever, I feel the same height with you, because when I'm staying next to you, I'm half of you, right? Then I feel bad, man.
Actually, you're taller than me right now. You're on top
right
of
now,
you're top of
me. So when we give a picture, Mario, you and me, I'm looking at both of you this. So now I feel comfortable. That has advantages for short people like me.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, and I strongly wish luck for your great attempt with Ika Industries. I'm pretty sure very